President Trump with Ambassador Nikki R. Haley and the White House Chief of Staff John F. Kelly at the United Nations in September. Doug Milster, New York Times. United Nations. The United States on Wednesday revived its objection to an annual United Nations General Assembly resolution deploring the American trade embargo on Cuba, a year after having abstained from the vote for the first time. The reversal, which left the United States nearly isolated on the issue at the United Nations, reflected the toughened attitude toward Cuba by President Trump, who has distanced his administration from the historic thaw in relations begun by his predecessor, Barack Obama. The vote on the resolution in the 193-member General Assembly was 191-2. The United States and Israel, which often acts in concert with its American ally, were the lone dissenters. The State Department had signaled on Tuesday that the United States intended to vote against the resolution, which calls for a repeal of the embargo imposed in 1962 after the break in relations with Cuba. The United States does not fear isolation in this chamber or anywhere else, Mr. Trump's United Nations ambassador, Nikki R. Haley, said in a statement to fellow diplomats before the vote. In remarks that evoke the Cold War-era language aimed at the Castro government, Ms. Haley said the United States opposed the resolution to demonstrate continued solidarity with the Cuban people and in the hope that they will one day be free to choose their own destiny. Under Mr. Obama, the United States restored diplomatic relations with Cuba, easing 5 decades of enmity with the island nation of 11 million. But the trade embargo, which can be rescinded only by Congress, has remained in force. The annual vote on the resolution condemning the embargo has become something of a theatrical ritual at the United Nations and a venue for critics of American policy to vent their anger. Cuba's Foreign Minister, Bruno Rodriguez, who also spoke before the vote, denounced the United States and Ms. Haley for what he described as her disrespectful remarks, and said the Trump administration lacked the slightest moral authority to criticize Cuba. The atmosphere was in sharp contrast to the vote in 2016, when Mr. Obama's ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, abstained, breaking with precedent and receiving sustained applause. Ms. Power said the abstention did not mean the United States condoned the political and economic restrictions in Cuba. But the abstention reflected the Obama White House's view that decades of American efforts to ostracize Cuba had not worked. The General Assembly vote came against the backdrop of other tensions between the Trump administration and Cuba, tied partly to mysterious illnesses that have afflicted American diplomats in Havana. Last month, Mr. Trump blamed Cuba for the illnesses, which led to the abrupt withdrawal of American embassy personnel. He also expelled 15 Cuban diplomats from Washington. Cuban officials have denied responsibility for the illnesses and suggested that the Trump administration had concocted an excuse to downgrade ties. A version of this article appears in print on November 2, 2017, on page A5 of the New York edition with the headline U.S. Envoy Defends Cuba Embargo at UN, Reversing Obama.